McLaren's Formula One driver plans for 2023 featured a major risk when it became clear the team wanted to bin a multiple Grand Prix winner in Daniel Ricciardo for a rookie that McLaren hadn't even evaluated itself. Oscar Piastri's switch from Alpine to McLaren was one of this season's biggest talking points, and the move was so contentious that Alpine spent a long time playing hardball. In an unexpected twist though, McLaren, Piastri and Alpine have finally reached a mutual understanding, handing a boost to McLaren and the man tasked with succeeding where Ricciardo failed. Piastri has been part of the Alpine Driver Academy since winning the Formula Renault Eurocup in 2019, and he was named Alpine's reserve driver in Formula One this year. He was preparing to become a future Alpine race driver, and was initially going to be placed on loan at Williams for 2 seasons before Alpine's contract negotiations with Fernando Alonso broke down and Alonso made his surprise switch to Aston Martin for 2023. Alpine tried to promote Piastri in Alonso's place, only to discover Piastri had signed a contract to race for McLaren instead in 2023 and beyond. This dispute went to F1's Contract Recognition Board, which ruled Piastri was free to join McLaren next year. But it looked like McLaren wouldn't get its hands on Piastri until January at the earliest, as Alpine intended to hold Piastri to his original reserve driver agreement. This was still the case as recently as last month, when McLaren boss Andreas Seidel said that Alpine's signing of Pierre Gasly for 2023 wouldn't change anything, as Alpine still planned to keep hold of Piastri until the very end of 2022. This would put even more pressure on McLaren and its new signing to get up to speed quickly and prove himself a worthwhile replacement for Ricciardo. But that's all changed, as McLaren will now get a surprise early start with Piastri after Alpine agreed to release him to drive for McLaren in the post-Abu Dhabi Grand Prix test. And what's more, Piastri has already sampled McLaren machinery as part of this agreement. He drove McLaren's 2021 car in a private test in France earlier in November, ahead of being formally released on Monday the 21st. Given a big part of the CRB ruling in Piastri's and McLaren's favour in the summer was that Alpine never actually offered Piastri a proper contract and even botched his reserve driver agreement, you might be wondering whether there was ever a proper deal in place that he actually needed releasing from. But even if it was a little makeshift, a registration of a 2022 reserve driver contract that the Piastri side agreed was lodged with the CRB, so what is officially considered a valid deal has been in play all year. That's why Piastri needed to be released. But even though Alpine eventually played ball, McLaren and Piastri could probably have forced the issue anyway, if they had wanted to. Piastri's Alpine deal covered the reserve driver role, stipulated a certain amount of 2021 car testing, and included 2 Friday practice sessions. Although he completed the majority of his mileage before all this kicked off in the summer, he still had more tests to come, and he hadn't taken part in any free practice sessions. Unsurprisingly, the 2021 car programme stopped once Alpine learned of Piastri's McLaren defection, and Alpine turned instead to Jack Doohan, another of its academy drivers, to complete F1's newly mandated rookie practice running instead. Alpine briefly kept using Piastri as a simulator driver after the summer break, but then parked him from that work as well. Anyway, the point is, Alpine had obligations to fulfill with Piastri this year, and benching him meant those obligations weren't met in full. So, if Piastri and McLaren had wanted to, they probably could have forced an early release by claiming a breach of contract. But given how acrimonious this saga has often been, it's probably for the best that it's all ended amicably. Officially starting work with McLaren on November 21st, 2022 instead of January 1st, 2023 won't make or break Piastri's time with the team, but this is definitely a better situation to be in. McLaren is sort of going about this in a backwards way. Having discovered a driver of Ricciardo's experience and quality is simply incompatible with both the McLarens he has driven, McLaren paid off his contract a year early in order to sign a driver it had zero experience of. Piastri impressed McLaren with his successive rookie Formula 3 and Formula 2 title wins, and he's racked up over 3,000 kilometres of testing in old Alpine machinery. So he's about as highly rated a rookie as you'll find, plus he has more experience than most F2 graduates in the modern era. But none of that experience has been with McLaren, until now. The private Paul Ricard test was McLaren's first opportunity to properly evaluate Piastri. Seidl refused to read too much into the test, stressing it was a way to start building McLaren's working relationship with Piastri, as well as let Piastri start to learn the team's systems and procedures. But Seidl described it as a good start, and the bigger benefit will come in the Abu Dhabi test, which Seidl said will be very important. Piastri will be able to drive the team's 2022 car, get a small head start on things like his seating position, and generally gain a bit more relevant experience going into the winter. Plus, unlike in his private test, there will be other cars running in Abu Dhabi, and while like-for-like comparisons will be almost impossible, McLaren will still be able to begin drawing some more meaningful conclusions. It's not game-changing, but in an era of massively restricted testing, F1 rookies have it tough. Anything ticked off the to-do list now is buying back valuable hours and kilometres of running in what will be a very limited pre-season in 2023. Ultimately, McLaren's objective is for Piastri to turn up at the Bahrain Grand Prix for next year's opening race, not feeling like it's his first race in F1. That's still going to be a challenge, but it's one that McLaren and Piastri have started tackling almost 2 months earlier than they originally expected. Piastri's presence in the Abu Dhabi test should mean a full house of new faces in new places. Every driver that's switching teams or making their debut in 2023 is expected to drive next Tuesday, which is not exactly uncommon, as this tends to be a rare example of F1 teams cooperating. Some are occasionally minded to play hardball, as Alpine could have done with Piastri, but as Alpine team boss Otmar Szafnauer said, if everyone agrees to early releases, then everyone is on the same level playing field. And that's exactly what will happen in Abu Dhabi. In this specific triangle, Piastri will drive for McLaren, Gasly will drive for Alpine, and Alonso will drive for Aston Martin. We should also see Nick de Vries in the AlphaTauri, Logan Sargent in the Williams, and, we believe, Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas, as he's expected to replace Mick Schumacher at that team for 2023. Of these drivers, Alonso has talked with most animation about eagerly getting stuck into working with his new team. He's identified comfort, the seat fit, and the steering wheel as things he wants to master at the test, as well as learning about anything that I will love to change and get tailor-made. To that we say, knock yourself out, Fernando. Those details will go unnoticed by most people paying even the slightest bit of attention to the test. But this test will still be worth looking out for, because it's always fun to see F1 drivers turning up in new colours for the first time. And thanks to a brilliantly chaotic driver market in 2022, there will be lots of drivers doing that next week.